so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads. Welcome to a very special episode dedicated to none other than you, the P-heads themselves. I am your P-head enthusiast and hostess for the day, Alexa Hauser. I have been blessed to have the experience of helping out with Positive Head social media for the better part of a year. And through my digital interactions, I began to realize, as did Brandon, that we have some incredible beings listening to this show who are taking the information that Brandon puts out through the podcast and using it to transform their lives and create wonderful things. You listeners are all a huge, huge part of the life force that propels this show forward through time and space, and we think it's time to bring forth some of you beautiful reflections and delve a little deeper into this collection of energy that is the Positive Head community. So as we shine the spotlight on our listeners, what we'll have them do is share their stories of how they attracted Positive Head into their life, the transformation it's facilitated for them, and what they're focused on creating now that they're in a more positive headspace. Also, this episode of the Positive Head podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Hello, all you positive heads. On this week's P-Head Posse episode, our guest is Positive Head listener Allan Morelock. Allan is a spiritual teacher who uses energy healing to accelerate and integrate the spiritual awakening process. He is the author of Nothing Other, a spiritual memoir, and Raindrops Falling on the Ocean, a collection of poetry. He is a teacher of Trillium Awakening since 2010. Allan grew up in the Appalachian Mountains of East Tennessee. He has known that his being is not limited to his current body and common life experience since early childhood. Hi, Allan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alexa. Excited to be here. And big hug to all the Positive Head listeners. What a great community of people has come together around this project.
Oh, I totally agree. It's so nice that we all have each other as we're going through this experience.
It's just awesome.
It really is. Yeah. How did you find this podcast?
You know, I've been thinking about that. I can't remember how I stumbled across it. I have to confess, I seem to have an endless curiosity about everything spiritual. And somehow I ran across it and immediately subscribed. And I can't say that I've listened to everyone, but I love the interviews. So I love to hear about people and their stories. And I was really kind of double hooked when I saw that Brandon was reading from Oneness, which is a book that I've picked it up several years ago, and I love the book. And I love the work that she presents to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, isn't it funny how we all find our way to this podcast, but don't even know how? It's like we were all just carried here.
I thought I was the only one that couldn't remember how.
Yeah. No, I think a few of us are that way actually. But you said you love to hear people's stories. So speaking of that, perfect segue to what is your story? Can you tell us a little bit about what your journey's been like up until this point?
Well, the book Nothing Other is a spiritual memoir, which gives the long version. I'll try to give a couple of highlights without, belaboring this thing. But when I was, as far as I can extrapolate back into the past, I was probably about 3.5 to 4 years old. And I grew up on a farm, which our lifestyle was so primitive, most people listening to this would think nobody living still lived that way. But it was very, very primitive, living on the side of a mountain in a little shack, which not much better than my current chicken house. Mm-hmm. I wandered. I was I'd gotten by myself and wandered up onto the hill above the house. Back of their house just went up steeper and steeper into the mountain. And I was looking down on the house, and I had this realization that I'd been displaced, shall we say, from my true home. And it was an incredible shock. You'd have to imagine that you're just living your life, and all of a sudden you're in a completely different reality, and you don't know how you got there, or what happened, or what threw you there. It's kind of like that, because I could feel the the struggle to move my body, get my body to cooperate with my intention, and I was aware of the struggle and almost impossibility of communicating with language. And I knew that wasn't who I am, and so I kind of concluded in my immature logical mind, although it wasn't with these words or even these thoughts exactly, that I had been kidnapped from my true home and was being hypnotized to think I was a human. So that was the original experience. Now, at that moment, I, with all my whatever we have in terms of power, intention, vowed to find my way back to my true home, whatever it took, and that I would never forget that this wasn't my true nature. So those vows drove me through a lifetime of pursuit, and the fact that I could see this process of hypnotism, of moving from, let's say, the free spirit nature of our being into the conceptual human mind, did enable me to develop, for lack of a better word, I would say understanding of how we take on the delusion of being lost in the human predicament. So that continued on, and then at the age of 19, I went through a little emotional crisis, and then I became adamant that I had to have true knowledge. It wasn't so much about escaping this planet to another world, but it was about I had over an obsession, an overwhelming need to have true knowledge, which then plunged me into usage of hallucinogenics and other substances, and which wreaked havoc with my system, and then left me at the doorstep of meditation, which I began to practice quite, I don't want to say religiously, but diligently from 1972. It was a transcendental meditation, the TM technique. Went on to become a teacher, taught that for 12 years. And then I realized there was something that was still missing, and then began another leg of the journey, which took me into the world of being much more kind of psychic and, what's the word? Much more into the esoteric understanding of things. And then I went through a period of rebirthing and trainings and trying to develop this more human part, which then proceeded to take me into a devotional stage. And I went to India. I had 10 trips to India. So that kind of culminated in 1992. I had quite a profound shift. Easiest way to describe that is I completely lost all sense of identity and individuality. And what remained was just this vast, open, universal awareness. At which time my family concluded that I had gone completely nuts, and I think they seriously considered putting me in an institution, which, other than the grace of God, very well could have happened. I was looking back on it. I was in profound ecstasy 24/7, just mind-blowing ecstasy. But for the world around me, I looked like a complete madman, which began to. And even in that state or condition, I knew it couldn't last, because it literally would have burned up my body had it lasted, let's say, another few more days probably would have been all my body could tolerate. So then I was reacclimated into being human, and then went through a period of about 10 years or so of deep self-inquiry, completely immersed myself in the work of Nisargadatta, Ramana Maharshi. And that kind of reached a stage where there was just nothing else there. Then I began what I think of as a stage of embodiment, trying to integrate that into my human being, the normal everyday human with all its quirks and oddities and traits that aren't always optimal. Then I began to teach around 2009, 2010, and that continues. And so there was a period in there where I was very interested in how this integration process works. What could I learn? What could I understand? What could I develop around that? And probably listen to I would guess maybe 1,000 different teachers and systems of how this integration thing works. So eventually kind of came to some conclusions, and I'm still interested and still discovering, still developing, because there's seems like an infinite amount of knowledge that one could gain about this process. That's pretty, I think that's enough.
Well, that was a lot of amazing information. It sounds like you've been on quite a journey and trajectory and gone through a lot of metamorphosis and transformation. Yeah.
And still, I'm pretty much the same old guy.
After all that, still the same old guy.
Yeah. Still the same. I actually feel more, shall we say, ordinary now than ever.
Because you feel more in resonance with who you really are?
Yeah, there's not the same sense of seeking or trying to escape. More of just being what I am in the common sense, and what I am in the exalted sense.
And how? Oh, go ahead.
Well, what else were you going to ask? I
was going to ask, if it seems like you've gone through, like I mentioned, so many different phases of this, so many different stages. And I'm just curious, what advice you would give to someone listening. Maybe like, is there something that was essential to that journey for you, to this, something that really, really benefited you that you think would benefit more listeners to explore?
Well, thanks, Alexa. It's a really good question, and I'm very reticent about giving advice. But I do think that I've been able to kind of boil something out of it all, distill something out that is really principle. And I would say the first thing to someone who is curious about spirituality is that I think your biggest aid, your biggest assistant is your own sincerity. So I think that's probably the most important thing to tend to. Keep your inspiration, your sincerity, keep tending that. So what that kind of means, go where you feel fed, go where you feel inspired and nourished, and you find yourself in a rut somewhere doing a practice or attending an organizational meeting that is not inspiring you, then it's time to move on. You've probably plateaued for that program, because there will come a time, I think, for everyone, there will come a time when there's no longer a technique or a system, a book or a teacher that is going to optimize your particular process. Because in my understanding, each of us is profoundly unique. The uniqueness runs very, very deep. And there's two things about that. One, which is our own process of development. And the second, which I think at some stage becomes even more important, is what is the unique gift or offering that we have, that we carry? To say this in kind of a oversimplified version of this, it's like when we leave spirit, when we leave from spirit to come into form, the love of God is so immense that God bestows with each incarnating spirit a special gift, or maybe more than one gift, which is not for me or the one who bears the gift, but the gift is for the world. That's how I particularly interpret the verse. There's a verse in the Bible that says, God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. Well, who is God's only begotten Son? God's only begotten Son is every living human. Because God sees from God's viewpoint, it's oneness. It's not multiplicity. The multiplicity is a celebration of the oneness. It's not the cause of the oneness. So that each of us bears that gift, and our joy is when that gift can come through us and serve in some way. And I would even go so far as to say that when, let's say, someone is wanting or seeking to know what's their role in the world, what's their gift or whatever, I would say what's more important than knowing what it is to develop sincerity around the element of being in service. So the more you're committed to service, the more your gift is going to be obvious, because your gift is not for you. Your gift is for the world. And then giving that gift is when there's the greatest, at least for me, that's where there's the greatest joy. Greatest joy is in serving and helping other people. So I think in the meantime, in order to tend to your own intensity, I would say develop a highest intention for your lifetime. Cultivate, understand, develop, and put yourself into this mode of having a single-minded intention for your lifetime. A human lifetime from the viewpoint of spirit, is a very brief event. It's not as long. From the other side, a lifetime is a very short thing. So what I've seen many people do, and I'm not criticizing, it's just an observation, that most people kind of roam through life, and they go from one thing to another thing to another thing. At the end of life, not much has happened. But for a person who has a single-minded intention throughout their life, something quite amazing can happen. And you can see that in the lives of artists, musicians, performers, even businessmen, everyone who has an intention that they stay with their entire life. It generally something much more profound is going to come of that person's life. So in terms of the highest intention, for me, I've had a kind of single-minded intention since that earliest stage. Now, it has nuanced as I've gone along. At first, my intention was to just get out of this world, but that was a very immature standpoint. That was an intention based on a very immature mind. And then that intention morphed into an intention for true knowledge. And then as that reached a certain stage of fulfillment, it nuanced into an intention to have the highest love for God. And then since then, it has nuanced even further. So we can raise the bar on the intention. We can nuance it to suit where we are now, but we never back down.
Wow.
So that intention then becomes your GPS setting, God's positioning system. And when we align our intention with the purpose of the universe, which is can be a bit of a workout, so to speak, but it can be done. Then it's as though we're flying with the wind at our back. So the universe supports what we're doing and what we're about. It doesn't necessarily mean it'll be easy or feel good all the time, but it means it will be more effective and more productive. So the role then, this trajectory of aligning our intention with the purpose of the universe and teasing out our highest intention for our lifetime, then the next step of that is developing an ability or at least a deep, profound willingness to be guided by our intention. Just as you put in a GPS and there's a single voice that guides you every step of the way, there is a power that guides us along our life, but it's an intuition that discerns the guidance of that voice, and it can come in 1,000 different forms. It can come in the form of a book, a teacher. It often comes to me in the form of an animal, or just an insight in my when I'm sleeping, like in the form of a dream, or when I'm just meditating, or at any time it can come as an insight. So that voice, the GPS voice, God's positioning system voice, is much more multifaceted.
Wow. That's, I just want you to keep talking because that was all just very on point and, even synchronistic with my life, because that's something I was talking about last night with someone about, it seems as if, when it really comes down to it, when you really think about it, it's like when you have a clear intention, when you have a clear desire, and you're like, I'm doing that. Like, that is I want that and I'm going to get it. It's like, those are the moments when everything moves out of the way, right? Those are the moments when it happens. You do it, you manifest that. There's nothing, it pushes through it. You see it. Yeah. But when in the places in our life when we are not very clear, aka we don't have a clear intention, those are the things that are constantly muddied and kind of wishy-washy and kind of never manifesting, right? And so it's almost so simple, but it's so powerful to realize, if your energy isn't clear and focused on one intention, then it's all over the place on that subject. So therefore, having an intention and getting clear enough to have an intention is actually the most powerful thing, one could say, that you could do in order to move forward. What's your...
Yeah, I think so. And I think also there, at some stage, we go through a transition, which is a transition of the will. So in my case, if you understand human design, I don't have a natural will. It's very light duty, but I do have a willingness, and I think willingness it's like the will. For some people have a strong will. At this stage, the will can start to crumble, and you start to fall into the willingness, which has more to do to surrender to this greater will. And that's why it's not so, shall we say, black and white. And some people I've worked with who the will is crumbling, and they can go through a stage of confusion and chaos and not having clarity about what's going on. That's a kind of preparation for this willingness. It can feel like you're crossing a desert. It can feel like the dark night of the soul when that transition is coming, which preparing for a greater will, which I like the Sanskrit interpretation instead of God's will. I like this word sankalpa. This came to me intuitively, that sankalpa really captures it more fully. And when I looked up definitions, I didn't find one that resonated exactly. So I looked up the root, and the root san means of the totality. And then kalpa is the will. So it's basically the same thing as the will of God, but the will of God has some connotations that I don't find to be appropriate for my understanding. But when we look at it as the will of the will of the all, so there is the will of the human collective, and then there's the will of the greater consciousness. And I think that one of the things that's happening now that makes the political scene look so chaotic is these have been out of alignment for a long time, and now there's so we say a recalibration going on, so that the collective human is being exposed to everything now like never before. All of the crazy, shall we say, dark stuff that's been going on behind the scenes is becoming visible, and the collective human consciousness is taking it in and will recalibrate. I don't say if, I say will. That's a position that I hold. I don't hold there's any alternative. There's no space in me to think of an alternative other than our successfully transitioning into a new era for the human being. So that's why I use the word intention, because we may clarify our intention, and then it's a matter of finding the guidance so that we know when to upgrade the intention, when to clarify it, when to be more specific. Here's an example of something that happened for us. We were wanting to do some rearranging of furniture in the house, and as my wife does this kind of work also. So we had in mind to put the room where I am now. We have an old couch here, which is fine. It's comfortable, but it didn't quite look right for the space. So we got in mind we wanted a futon here because sometimes we have people that sleep over. And so we got in mind exactly what we wanted. We did a little bit of shopping, and we weren't finding it, and then we just kind of left it on the back burner. And about, I would say 3-4 weeks later, I got an email from one of my students, and she said, "Oh, Allan, I happen to have this futon that I have to get rid of. Why don't you see if one of your employees would like to have it?" I immediately knew that was the futon. So about a few days later, here it is sitting in my house, exactly, even a little bit better than what I had envisioned. The same kind of wood, the same kind of frame, the nice futon, and the color works really good with the room.
Wow.
So that's when your intention is in keeping with this greater Sankalpa, this greater will of the collective.
And you mentioned, this transition, this upgrade that we're going through as humans. Do you have any insight or feeling into what that's going to look like over the next couple of years?
I don't listen to Greg Braden extensively, but I follow his work kind of tangentially. Greg Braden and Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton. To me, these are, if you want to listen to the news, listen to these people. Mm-hmm. If you listen to Fox News and CNN, you're not listening to the news. You're listening to people who are looking in the rearview mirror, trying to figure out where we're going, because they are interpreting interpretations based on what was interpreted in the past. Right. So the news means what's coming, what's new. And in Greg Braden's work, I believe he says that 2018 is the year of optimal conflict between humans. So inner human conflict is kind of peaking at this period, and we will move into an era of greater harmony. I think starting in probably 2020, 2022, we'll start to see that arise. How much shakeup will come between now and then, I don't know. I keep energizing the space of that happening as easily and smoothly as possible. But I do think a lot more skeletons are going to come out of the closet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, it has to become visible, because you can't make a choice about something that you're not aware of. How do you make a choice about it? So it has to become visible.
Absolutely. And I think even this week, for me, I've been feeling it's like all the things that I've put away in my subconscious, or I've just buried, been like, I don't want to think about that over the course of my lifetime. It's like, even this week, I feel like those things are suddenly like rising to the surface for myself, and I'm being forced to look at them. And it's like so painful in certain ways, but it's also so powerful and healing in other ways, because it's helping me realize, like, on one hand, I'm like, I don't want to look at this. And on the other hand, it's like, well, if you look at it, then you can make new choices about it. So do you want to, it's like we've been, we've had like smoke screens in front of our faces, like so that we don't have to look at the things that are painful for us, but it's in acknowledging our pain. And this is true on like a personal level and a collective level. It's in acknowledging the things that are painful that we actually can change them and transmute them. Right.
I really believe that it's like somewhere, I don't know if it's one of the scriptures or where I first encountered this idea, but it was complete resonance for me. If you want to transcend something, you want to go beyond something, you have to complete that first. So, for example, there's a lot of spiritual talk about transcending your ego, and yet many people I see trying to do that, they don't have a well-developed ego. It's best to be clear about what it is, to let it be developed. If when you build a house, first you build a foundation. Foundation's all underground. You don't really see it, but it has to be complete before you build a good house. So whatever stage we're going to next, this stage needs to be completed. And I think, I look at numerology sometime, and I've not studied it extensively, but I was kind of born with this instinct for numbers. So 2018 it's a 2, and it's also an 11. 8 and 2 is 8. 8 and plus 1 plus 2 is 11. So 11 is a master number. So when I look at that, what I kind of understand about it is it's the time when kind of there's an imperative to individually make the choice. Do we want to stay with the world of duality, which 2 represents, or do we want to move to the reality of 11, which is a master number, which represents spiritual, a high stage of spiritual maturity. Now that 11 in numerology, the people have 11s, 22s, and 33s in their numbers. That master number is a challenge to maintain. And it will, for most of us, revert to the lower digit at times, and that can make us feel a bit confounded. So this is the year of choice. Like, this is the year from which, in the future, there's no more fence sitting. You really, it's a year you're compelled to make a choice. Are we going to move into spiritual mastery, or are we going to stay in the world of duality, in the world of polarization? That's just looking. I'm just looking in my interpretation of the basic numbers that I see. Now, if you like, I'd like to say something more about that.
Yeah.
So as I see it, the human being / planet Earth has been an experiment in development of spirit, or the soul energy. When I say spirit, what I mean by spirit, because I use these words differently than certain other people, but to me, from the great source, which I may call Godhead, comes the mandala of souls, and then their individual souls, and then from the soul comes the spirit, and then the spirit manifests in human form. But this particular domain that we call human and earth is a particular bandwidth of frequency in which one of the predominant mechanisms of development here is polarization. We recognize light because we have dark. We recognize good because we have bad. We recognize pain because we have pleasure. And, for simplest example is if you point up and you're talking to somebody in China and they point up, you're pointing in very different directions. So you can only say up if you're down. So it's a world, this is a reality built of polarization. And we learn at the level of spirit. There's a quickening in spirit, which feeds and develops the soul capacities through the engagement with polarization. Some people call it duality. I'd rather use the word polarization because it's more easy to describe exactly what we mean by that. So that leads us to conclude that there must be some stage at which we are sufficiently educated in polarization that we can go on to a higher way of learning rather than relying on the opposites. Because, see, so most people think, or most people are kind of, I would say, governed by a sentimentality that says if I can just become good enough, I can eliminate bad. Or if I can just become wealthy enough, I'll eliminate the fear of poverty. And that never really works out. You can never be good enough. You can never be the greatest athlete for at least for very long. But you can start to see, by looking at that and looking at your life and understanding what's going on, you can start to grasp that you can never achieve ultimate fulfillment so long as you're caught in the conflict of polarization. Then what it looks like when we go beyond the learning mechanism of polarization is there's another way of learning. And that way of learning, I would say, requires an ability to look at both sides of the polarity and see what's beyond and including those. What is greater than those? What holds those? And in the highest sense, maybe not the highest sense, but I'd say provisionally the highest sense, what you're left with is consciousness itself. Consciousness does not polarize. Consciousness includes the good, the bad, the light, the dark, the left, the right. But just starting to see that by playing those two against each other, it does strengthen something at the core. And then when that core becomes strong enough, then we can go on to another way of learning. And it sounds kind of abstract, I guess, and may be difficult to follow. Let me see if I can give an example. Okay, here's something that I went through fairly recently. Okay. One of the teachers that I really like was talking about using your body to be present. Just keep yourself in presence. And he would say, just pay attention to a sensation in your body. Now, there's other schools of thought of spiritual teaching that say, forget your body. Your body's an illusion. It's meaningless. Just pay attention to consciousness. And so I just kind of took that in and sat with it without trying to figure it out, but just sat with it to see how is it possible that both of those are true? Is there a greater truth here that gives both of those validity, but teaches me in a way that's beyond the need to polarize them? Because the mind wants to make one of those right and one of them wrong, and to build out the one that's right for my benefit. But as I sat with that, at some point I recognized, it just came to me intuitively, that the truth is what used to be thought of as the body, what is often commonly thought of as the body, is an object. So we think of the body as an object. And we think of the desk in front of us as an object. We think of the tree as an object. But truer than that is an understanding that it's not an object. It's simply a frequency. It's a frequency. So the body is a frequency. The desk is a frequency. The tree is a frequency. It's a frequency pattern. Now, what I discovered, what this this contemplation led to was there was a moment during my inner practice when I was able to directly see that as the mind arises out of consciousness, I may have to go back and fill that in a little bit, but from consciousness comes the mind. As the mind arises from consciousness, a fundamental law is injected into the mind, which causes an imperative of the mind to perceive object as solid, which is not the highest truth, but it's like an imperative of the mind to have that perception for the sake of survival of the body, sake of this survival instinct. So then that gave me the capacity to see that both these schools are right. They're speaking about the same truth. They're speaking about it from different sides of they're polarizing the truth into a yes the body, no the body. But the truth is yes the body, but not the body as an object. Because when you start to deeply understand that the body is a frequency pattern, then by paying attention to the body, you're simply paying attention to frequency, paying attention to vibration, and that vibration then can lead you much closer to the truth, and it helps you to attune to, let's say, the guidance of spirit, because you're touching what's valid and real. Which it's kind of like by paying attention to the body, you're announcing your coordinates, your coordinates in time and space to this greater consciousness in which there is no time and space. But we're relating that to time and space, which enhances our development. And the result then can be, I don't know which of those is better for any particular person, but they're both effective because they're both talking about the same thing in essence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I love that I love that whole thing, because I always think about how everything is energy, yet we perceive things as solid. And like when you experiment with psychedelics, like especially LSD, what I've experienced is everything is moving all the time. Everything is very wavy. Everything is constantly reshaping, reforming. And I had this realization once, like a couple years ago, where I was like, wait a minute, I'm not getting high. Like, I'm seeing things as they are. I'm seeing more of how things actually are because my resistance is lessened. And so then that made me think, well, wait a minute. So everything is actually moving all the time, and it's very fluid, and it's not held in place at all. It's just our perception that holds things in place. And so I love the way you just described that about the body and about the frequency. And it's really, really interesting to me. But yeah, absolutely. That's amazing.
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the, I'd say, large criteria for really graduating from the school of polarity that we call human incarnation. And I'm not saying we should desire no more human incarnation. I think that's a decision we'll make when we get to that stage. But to exercise this capacity to learn from a place that's beyond polarization, to be able to take into account both sides of the polarity, and look to see what's beyond that, what's greater than that, what's holding both of those. And by exercising that capacity while we're in human form, I think it's a very powerful process and mechanism, and I don't know whether I should say it's the equal of meditation, but it certainly is. It's certainly bringing balance and integration to the capacities that we develop with meditation practices.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It like helps connect us in a deeper way, like helps us see the greater picture of everything.
Yeah, but it helps put it into practice.
Okay.
Because I don't know, I look at my Facebook feed sometimes, and people who are longtime spiritual people are still they're still really embedded in the polarization of what's happening politically, as though we can achieve good by eliminating the bad or overcoming the bad. It's just not what I'm about. I'm about looking beyond good and bad. And so for me, the left wing and the right wing, and I'm not into politics very much, but if just to look at it from a greater standpoint, let's say you take your left arm and let that be the left wing, and let your right hand be the right wing. And if you do isometric exercise, when I can't get to the gym, I do isometric exercise. You take your right hand and your left hand, you push against, and you push back and forth. And what that does is strengthens your body, so that the pushing back and forth of the political parties has a potential, from my viewpoint, to strengthen the body of the human. I'm generally more left wing, although I would say overall independent. I like to look at issues and look at people, but there's a friend of mine who's very, very hardcore Republican, and he and I really love and care for each other, and we don't let that become, let's say, a hurdle in our relationship. We're just there. He expresses his viewpoints, I express mine, and then we love each other. We don't make our relationship contingent on whether we agree with that or not.
Right.
And it actually strengthens our relationship. We have a stronger relationship because of it.
Yeah, that's really, that's something, and it's interesting because that's something that comes up quite a bit for me as a fear, actually. And I think as for the collective as a fear, and which is what's causing all of this, right? This idea that we have to agree on everything. And if we don't, then we have to separate or be opposed to one another.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't. And actually it can make us stronger,
right.
To have, to appreciate our differences.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah. I love that. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see, hopefully that, start to manifest and play out a little more, like the strengthening of the body of the collective. And I agree. I mean, I'm not into politics really either, but every time politics comes up, I actually think of it. I'm like, wow, I'm so happy all of this is happening, even though can get messy, even though people are getting upset. It's because, people are actually, going back to what we were talking about earlier, they're actually looking at what's happening. They're actually recognizing what's happening. They're actually feeling emotion in their body about it and wanting to make a conscious choice about it. Whereas before it's oh, whatever, it's anything can happen and we don't really care. Now people care. So, yeah, go ahead. Are you going to say something?
Yeah, I'm just agreeing with you.
It's nice to see things shaking up and people jumping out of their seat, kind of. So, well, I have just a couple more questions before we go, because I can't believe time is passing so quickly. I could listen to you talk for forever. You're very, very interesting, and your perspective is really enlightening. But so do you have any fun or inspiring manifestation story? I mean, you actually gave us one with the futon, but any other awesome stories of synchronicity, anything like that you'd like to share?
I mean, that happens in my life so constantly. I can't think of anything in particular.
I know. At a certain point, it just becomes the norm, right? Okay.
That futon story was kind of the most. It was quite sweet, and it's sort of outstanding. It's a small thing in the bigger scheme of things, but it's a really good example.
Yeah.
And also I had been wanting I'm in the stage of retiring from my business. I have a small business that I operate, and I'm in the stage of exiting from that because the demands of my teaching have increased to the point where it's a little hard to keep juggling both. And I wanted to have some kind of camper so I could, get out by myself a little more. I love to just be out and completely absorbed in nature. And nothing was really working. Then I was visiting one of my customers one day. It's a couple, and they had this camper van. And I don't know why the subject even came up. She said, "Oh, we're going to sell the van." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, how much do you want for it?" And it's sitting in my driveway now. We bartered for the work I was doing for them.
Wow. Love that.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing how well it suits what I needed.
It's
kind of like I'd given up looking for it, you know.
Yeah. And then it was delivered. The universe provides. That's amazing. Well, amazing. So how about how can people get in touch? You have a book. You have 2 books, right? And then you are a teacher. How can people get in touch with you if they want to either purchase the books or?
Well, they can email me at Allan, ALLAN, at nothingother.com. So the website is nothingother.com. And that gives, that website's not been updated for a couple of years. As my teaching work is about nurturing people, assisting people in the journey of spiritual awakening. And within the last year and a half or so, particularly the last year, some cosmic force has pushed me into the school of healing, which really complements the teaching work. And I didn't quite know what was going on at first. I just knew I just saw it was happening, and I cooperated with the happening. Wow. But the work I do, the teaching and healing work, there's sort of 2 phases of it. One is the deepening in spirit, or aligning yourself as you know yourself to be, aligning that with what we could call pure source energy, deepening that alignment. And then the healing work is about taking whatever comes up as an obstacle to that alignment, finding what's in the way of that, finding what was the obstacle, and extracting the meaning of that obstacle, and then converting it into energy that supports the alignment. That's sort of the cliff notes of how I do it. And I use the work of Dr. Bradley Nelson called Body Code and Emotion Code. And I use somewhat the work of Dr. Richard Bartlett. It's called Holosets. He was the one who developed matrix energetics.
I love him. I know all about matrix energetics.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the Holoset model, which is, he calls it Beyond ME. And I'm not an expert in that, but I can use it. And I use dowsing sometimes, actually quite often, which also came. I was the most surprised of anyone that I was doing dowsing. This is a story about how that came, but it came, and then something happened one evening. I remember the exact moment when it happened. I was taken into an altered state of awareness, or I found myself in an altered state. And I kind of was introduced to this electric blue energy. And I found that I can transfer files on that, using that energy. I can transfer files of information. Those files usually have to do with the well-being of parts of the body. And somehow I'm able to locate energies that are appropriate for a particular person. It could be an herbal thing. It could be a mineral thing. It could also be other things.
That's awesome.
But it's often in the water or in the plants. That's probably what I'm most end up finding, and I use kinesiology to locate things. Kinesiology is a form of muscle testing. So I'd sit with a person, get their permission, then I use my body to test for yes and no. So I just look for an intuitive question. Sometimes it's just a matter of waiting until I get the right question, then I look for yes or no answer. So I become kind of an instrument in the hands of spirit. But it's not like channeling or trance or anything, because I am using kinesiology, because I'm embodied in my body also. And sometimes it's just a matter of things that I've pretty much worked through. Not that I've worked through everything. I still have my own issues, so to speak. But if it's something I previously handled and I don't have emotional attachment to anymore, oftentimes my body can just help the other person. I don't know how that works. I just know it happens.
Wow. That's amazing. This sounds very intriguing. Yeah, if you want to connect with Allan, definitely reach out to him. Again, can you say your email one more time? Sorry.
The website is nothingother.com, NOTHINGOTHER, nothingother.com. And my email is Allan, ALLAN, at nothingother.com.
Wonderful.
The first 5 listeners who contact me, I will do a 30 to 40 minute free session, just to kind of connect with them, and they can decide for themselves whether what I do is interesting or not.
Wow.
But what I do want to say, Alexa, I really appreciate being on the podcast, and hope my love of spirit and love for the listeners comes through. My appreciation for whoever's listening and my blessings to whoever's listening. I didn't come on here to promote my work. I'm actually pretty busy. I'm happy if more people come. I'm equally happy if nobody contacts me. I'm just happy to be here and be able to share. And I love the show. I love Brandon's work. I love your work. Something about Brandon. He's enough. I hope he's not offended by this, but he's enough. He's off color enough that he's like my kind of guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think we all feel the same way. Brandon is a special one. And thank you so much. I think we all feel the love. I feel it. I was having an oddly stressful day, and just sitting here listening to you has put me at such ease, and I'm truly appreciative to be in your energy. This was just a lovely conversation, and I thank you for sharing all of your wisdom, and I know the listeners will do the same. And yeah, until next time, Allan, thank you.
Thank you, and bye, and blessings to everyone.
Aw, okay, bye. That's it for this week's episode. If you're a listener with a story to share and are interested in being featured on a future episode of this special series, you can email me at alexa@positivehead.com. Also, if you're craving more consciousness elevating content, be sure to check out Gaia, which is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web, where you can stream an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. As you all hear Brandon constantly say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to journey deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place we know of to do it. Period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Otherwise, tune in next Friday for another P-Head Posse episode. And until then, as Brandon always says, journey well.